When you hear the year 1492, you probably picture Christopher Columbus and his three little ships, right? The discovery of a new world. But the real story, the one that completely reshaped our entire planet, is so much bigger than that. It's a story of biology, not just battles. See, for thousands of years, the Eastern and Western hemispheres, Europe, Asia, Africa on one side, the Americas on the other, they had been completely cut off from each other. They were two separate worlds of life, evolving on their own. So when they finally met, it wasn't just a meeting of people. It was a full-blown collision of two separate biological universes. And that question, well, it changes everything. It gets right to the heart of what we're talking about. This clash of worlds set off a massive biological exchange that would remake our planet, from the food we eat to the landscapes we see right outside our windows. To really get what a big deal this was, we first have to understand just how fundamentally different these two worlds were. I mean, honestly, they might as well have been on different planets. It all starts with what people ate. The Americas were powered by corn, an incredible feat of genetic engineering that turned a tiny wild grass into a super crop, and of course, the potato from the Andes. Europe, meanwhile, ran on grains like wheat and rye. The basic food that fueled their civilizations was completely alien to one another. And then you have the animals. This is a huge one. Europe had what you could call living engines, horses for war and travel, cattle to pull plows, the whole shebang. In the Americas, the biggest domesticated animal they had was the llama. And, you can't exactly ride a llama into battle or have it till a massive field. This difference was absolutely crucial. And the land itself? Wow. When Europeans first arrived, they thought the Americas were this untouched, pristine wilderness. But they were wrong. It was more like a giant, continent-sized garden, carefully managed by its people for thousands of years. Europe, on the other hand, was getting crowded. Its forests were shrinking, its rivers were polluted. It was starting to feel a little tapped out. So you've got these two completely separate worlds, and then bam, Columbus sails across the ocean. This didn't just connect two groups of people. It kicked off the biggest biological reshuffling in the history of life on this planet. So this event gets a name, the Columbian Exchange. It sounds kind of official, but what it really means is that the biological deck of cards for the entire planet was thrown into the air and completely reshuffled. And even though things moved in both directions, the consequences were anything but equal. Okay, so what actually crossed the Atlantic? From the Americas, the world got game changers like corn, potatoes, tomatoes, and even turkeys. Europe sent over horses, cattle, pigs, and wheat. But look at that last row on the right. Smallpox, measles, influenza. That list of invisible passengers, that's the part of the story that would have the most devastating impact of all. The Spanish conquistadors showed up with steel swords, guns, armor, horses, stuff that was absolutely terrifying to the people of the Americas. But their most powerful weapon, the one that did the most damage by far, was one they couldn't even see. 90%. Let that sink in for a second. That is the conservative estimate of how many Native Americans died from old world diseases. Things like smallpox and the flu. These were illnesses that were common in Europe, so people there had built up some immunity over centuries. But in the Americas, they were brand new, and the people there had absolutely no defense. The first-hand accounts from that time are they're gut-wrenching. This quote from a Spanish missionary describes a population that was completely helpless. It's a level of human catastrophe that's almost impossible for us to even wrap our heads around today. And here's the crucial part. The germs traveled faster than the conquerors. These diseases would race along native trade routes, wiping out entire societies, sometimes years before a single European ever laid eyes on them. This Great Dying, as it's called, essentially cleared the continent for colonization. So this Great Dying didn't just leave a human void, it left an ecological one too. Suddenly, the land wasn't being managed in the same way, and into that empty space rushed a whole new ecosystem, imported lock, stock, and barrel from Europe. It was like a four-step playbook for terraforming a continent. First, the settlers cleared the forests. Then they brought in the heavy metal plows to break up soil that had never been tilled before. Then they planted their own familiar grains, wheat, barley, rye. And finally, they let their massive herds of cattle and sheep just graze everywhere. They weren't adapting to the new world. They were literally remaking it to look like the old one. And those European animals, they didn't just stay on the farms. Oh no, they escaped, They went feral, and their populations absolutely exploded in this new land with hardly any predators. Horses became the wild mustangs that redefined life on the plains. Pigs turned into destructive wild boars. And cattle just ate their way across the continent. It was an accidental but incredibly effective biological conquest. Now you might be thinking, okay, interesting story, but that was 500 years ago. What does it have to do with me? Well, the answer is pretty much everything. The Columbian Exchange isn't just history. You can see its legacy every single day. Every time you eat a meal. Take the humble potato. This one little tuber from South America was so nutritious and so easy to grow that it fueled a massive population boom across Europe. It literally redrew the map. But there's a dark side to this too. The massive loss of life in the Americas created a huge labor shortage, which led directly to the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade to grow cash crops like sugar and tobacco for European markets. Think about some of our most iconic meals. Spaghetti with tomato sauce can't happen. The wheat is from Europe, but the tomatoes are from the Americas. A hamburger and fries, same deal. Cattle and wheat from the old world, potatoes from the new. Even your morning coffee with sugar or a simple chocolate bar. They're all products of this incredible, world-changing collision. Our plates are literally a map of this history. And that brings us to a final, pretty powerful thought. This great biological reshuffling, it never really stopped. In our globalized world, invasive species, new foods, and even viruses can cross continents in a matter of hours, not months. The Columbian Exchange was the dramatic first chapter, but we are still writing this story every single day. And it forces us to ask, what unforeseen biological consequences are we unleashing on the planet right now?